I found the envelope 3 days into the new year, wedged behind Mom's jewelry box in a drawer I'd opened 1,000 times before. The paper felt thin between my fingers, almost fragile, like it might disintegrate if I held it too long. Inside was a photocopy of Mom's will, dated April 2023, 8 months before she passed. My name was listed as the primary beneficiary of the house, our childhood home on Maple Ridge Avenue, the one with the wraparound porch and the garden Mom spent 20 years cultivating. The document was notarized, signed, witnessed by two people I recognized from her book club. But that wasn't the will we'd read at the lawyer's office back in November. That one, the official one my sister Corinne presented, had been dated June 2023, 2 months later. In that version, Corinne inherited the house. I got Mom's car and some savings bonds that totaled maybe $18,000. The lawyer, some guy named Howard Pemberton that I'd never heard Mom mention before, had seemed rushed during that meeting. He'd pushed the papers across his desk, pointed to where we needed to sign, and said something about Mom's wishes being very clear. I remembered feeling gutted, but not surprised. Corinne had always been Mom's favorite, or at least that's what I'd told myself to make it hurt less. She was the one who stayed local after college, who had Sunday dinners at Mom's every week. I'd moved 2 hours away for work, visited monthly when I could, called every Wednesday evening without fail. But maybe that wasn't enough. Except now I was holding proof that maybe, just maybe, I'd been enough after all. My hands started shaking. I sat down on the edge of Mom's bed, Corinne's bed now, technically, since she'd moved into the house within a week of the funeral, and read the document 3 more times. The house. Mom had left me the house. Not because she loved me more, I didn't think, but because she knew I needed it more. I was still renting a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in the city, still drowning in student loans from getting my graphic design degree, still rebuilding after my divorce with Fletcher finalized the previous spring. Corinne, meanwhile, lived in a pristine 4-bedroom colonial with her husband Briggs, who worked as some kind of finance consultant. They vacationed in Turks and Caicos twice a year. They drove matching luxury SUVs. The date on this will, April 2023, that was right after Mom's birthday party. I'd driven down for it, brought her favorite lemon cake from that bakery on 5th Street, stayed the whole weekend. We'd sat on the porch that Sunday morning, watching the sunrise, and she'd told me she was proud of me, proud of how I'd started over after Fletcher, proud of the freelance work I was building, proud that I'd chosen happiness over staying in something that made me small. 2 months later, according to the will Corinne produced, Mom had apparently changed her mind. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend, Tessa. She answered on the second ring, and before she could even say hello, I said the words out loud for the first time. I think Corinne forged Mom's will. Tessa went quiet for several seconds. In the background, I could hear her daughter Ivy chattering about something, and then a door closing. "Say that again," Tessa said, her voice measured and careful. I told her everything. The envelope, the dates, the different beneficiaries, the lawyer I'd never heard of. When I finished, she exhaled slowly, the sound crackling through the phone speaker. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know." That was the truth. Part of me wanted to march over to Corinne's house, Mom's house, and throw the document in her face, demand answers. But another part of me, the part that had spent 31 years being the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, that part told me to be careful, to think it through. "You need a lawyer," Tessa said. "Not Howard whatever his name is. A real one, someone who specializes in estate stuff." She was right. I knew she was right. I ended the call and sat there in the silence, Mom's perfume still faintly clinging to the curtains, something floral and soft that reminded me of summer mornings. Outside, I could hear a neighbor's wind chimes, the metal tubes striking against each other in the January breeze. My phone buzzed. A text from Corinne. Corinne wrote, "Hey, can you come by this weekend? Need to go through some of Mom's things in the attic. thought you might want first pick before I donate everything." The casual cruelty of it made my chest tighten. She was already erasing Mom, boxing her up, clearing her out, and she wanted me to help. I stared at the message for a long time before I typed back a simple response. I replied, "Sure, Saturday work?" Corinne responded, "Perfect, 10 a.m.?" I confirmed and set my phone down. Saturday would give me 4 days. 4 days to figure out what the hell I was going to do with this information and whether I had the guts to blow up what was left of my family. Because if I was right, if Corinne had really done this, then she hadn't just stolen a house from me. She'd stolen my last real connection to Mom. I spent the next morning at a coffee shop near the riverfront, laptop open, searching for estate attorneys. Most of the websites looked the same: professional headshots, promises of compassionate representation, testimonials from grateful clients. I clicked through 7 different sites before I found one that felt right. Ramona Delgado. Her bio said she'd been practicing for 16 years, specialized in probate disputes and will contests, and had a reputation for taking on cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. Her office was in a converted brick building about 20 minutes from my apartment. I called and somehow got through to her directly. "Delgado Law?" she answered, her voice brisk but not unkind. I explained the situation in a rush: the 2 wills, the different dates, my suspicions about Corinne. When I finished, there was a pause. Ramona said, "Can you come in this afternoon? I have an opening at 3:30. I cleared my schedule. Her office was smaller than I expected, but warmer too. Bookshelves lined one wall, stuffed with legal volumes and case files. A spider plant cascaded from a filing cabinet in the corner, its runners nearly touching the floor. Ramona herself was probably in her mid-50s, with dark hair pulled into a low bun and sharp brown eyes that seemed to catalog everything. She gestured for me to sit and placed a yellow legal pad on the desk between us. "Walk me through it again," Ramona said. "Start from the beginning. When did your mother pass?" "November 8th, I said. "Last year. It was sudden, a stroke. She went to bed one night and didn't wake up." Ramona's pen moved across the paper, taking notes. "And you found this second will where?" "In her bedroom, hidden behind a jewelry box in her dresser drawer. I was looking for a bracelet she'd promised me, this silver one with tiny sapphires, my birthstone." "And the will your sister presented, the one dated June 2023, when did you first see that?" "At the reading, about a week after the funeral. Corinne arranged everything with this lawyer, Howard Pemberton. I'd never heard Mom mention him. When I asked Corinne where she found him, she said Mom had updated her estate planning earlier in the year and had used someone new." Ramona tapped her pen against the pad, her expression thoughtful. "Did your mother have an attorney she normally used?" "Yeah, Gerald Huang. He did her divorce paperwork back when she left my dad, and he handled some stuff when she bought the house outright in 2019. But Corinne said Mom wanted a fresh start with someone else, that Gerald had retired or something." Ramona made another note. "I'll check on that," she said. "The witnesses on both documents, are they the same people?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken of the April will. Ramona studied it, comparing it to the copy of the June will I'd brought with me. "Different witnesses," she said after a moment. "The April will has Lorraine Abbott and Joyce Finch, book club friends, you said." "Yeah, they'd known Mom for years." "And the June will has witnesses named Paul Gorski and Diane Mercer. Do you know them?" I shook my head. Never heard those names before. Ramona sat back in her chair, folding her hands on the desk. "Here's what I'm thinking," she said. "There are a few possibilities. 1, your mother genuinely changed her mind and executed a new will in June. 2, someone forged that will, whether your sister or someone acting on her behalf. 3, there was coercion involved. What do we do? How do we prove anything?" First, we verify the authenticity of both documents: handwriting analysis, checking the notary stamps, interviewing the witnesses if possible. We'll also want to pull your mother's medical records from around that time. Then we file a will contest in probate court. The words hung in the air like a challenge. "This is going to get ugly," Ramona said, her tone gentle but firm. "If your sister did forge that will, she's not going to admit it easily. There will be legal fees, court dates, probably some family fallout. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Mom's house, the porch where we'd had that conversation, the garden she'd loved, the life I could build there if it was really supposed to be mine. "Yeah," I said, "I'm prepared." Ramona nodded and pulled out a contract. "Then let's get started." I didn't tell Corinne what I was doing. Not yet. On Saturday morning, I drove to Maple Ridge Avenue and parked in the driveway like I'd done 100 times before. The house looked different already. Corinne had replaced Mom's cheerful yellow welcome mat with a plain gray one, and the flower pots on the porch were empty, the soil dried and cracked. She answered the door wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail. Corinne said, "Hey, come in. I've got everything pulled down from the attic already. Figured we could sort through it in the living room." I followed her inside. The house smelled different, too. Less like Mom's cooking and more like the vanilla candles Corinne favored. She'd rearranged the furniture, moved Mom's favorite reading chair into a corner, and replaced it with a sleek gray sectional. In the middle of the living room floor were 6 cardboard boxes, their flaps open, contents spilling out. Photo albums, old clothes, knickknacks, books. "I already grabbed a few things I wanted," Corinne said, settling onto the sectional with a cup of coffee. "But you're welcome to whatever's left. I just need to clear space, you know? Briggs and I are thinking of turning the attic into a home office." Of course they were. I knelt beside the nearest box and started sifting through it. Mom's high school yearbook, a set of ceramic birds she'd collected, a crocheted blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. Each item felt like a small betrayal, memories reduced to donation pile fire. "Did you ever meet Howard Pemberton?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Before the will reading, I mean." Corinne glanced up from her phone. "No," she said. "Why?" "Just curious. I'd never heard Mom talk about him." "She didn't talk about Gerald Huang much either," Corinne said with a shrug. "I don't think she liked discussing legal stuff." I pulled out a photo album and flipped it open. Photos of me and Corinne as kids, gap-toothed and sunburned, building sandcastles at the beach. Mom in the background, laughing at something Dad said. "Do you remember that trip?" I asked, holding up the album. Corinne smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Barely," she said. "I was, 7? 6, I corrected. I was 9. She took the album from me and steadied the photos for a moment before setting it aside. "You can have that one. I've got plenty of pictures on my phone." The moment felt loaded, heavy with things unsaid. I wanted to ask her why she'd done it, if she'd done it, why she needed the house so badly when she already had everything. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I kept sorting through boxes, piling up items I wanted to keep, a set of Mom's recipes handwritten on index cards, a bracelet that wasn't the one I'd been looking for, but pretty enough, a framed photo of the 3 of us from my college graduation. Around noon, Corinne's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and stood up. "I need to take this. Briggs, be right back." She stepped into the kitchen, her voice dropping to a murmur I couldn't quite make out. I stood and walked to the mantel where Corinne had displayed a few new photos. Her and Briggs at some gala, both of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. A vacation shot from what looked like Greece or Italy, all white buildings and blue water. And then, almost hidden behind the others, a photo of Mom. She was standing in the garden, dirt on her knees, holding a bunch of tomatoes she'd just picked. She looked happy. free, exactly the way I wanted to remember her. I picked up the frame and stared at it for a long moment. If you're watching this right now and you have a complicated relationship with a sibling, drop a comment and let me know I'm not alone in this. Because family drama hits different when there's money involved, doesn't it? Corinne's voice floated from the kitchen, sharper now. She said, "I don't care what he said, Briggs. We're not selling. I already told you, this house is worth way more than that appraisal." I froze. Selling? She came back into the room a moment later, her expression smooth again, like the conversation hadn't happened. "Sorry about that," Corinne said. "Work stuff. You finding everything okay?" "Yeah," I managed. "Just taking my time." She smiled, and for just a second I saw something flicker behind it, something calculating. "Take all the time you need," she said. But I knew, standing there in Mom's living room that wasn't Mom's anymore, that time was exactly what I didn't have, because Corinne was already planning her next move, and I needed to be ready. By the time I left Corinne's house that afternoon, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went pale. The overheard phone call kept replaying in my head. "We're not selling. This house is worth way more than that appraisal." She wasn't even planning to keep it. She was planning to flip it for profit. I called Ramona the second I got home. "She's going to sell," I said as soon as she picked up. "The house, I heard her on the phone with her husband. They're talking about appraisals." Ramona was quiet for a beat, and I could hear papers shuffling on her end. "That actually works in our favor," she said. "If she sells before we can contest the will, it complicates things significantly. But it also shows intent. She's not keeping the property for sentimental reasons. She wanted the asset." "What's our next step?" I asked. "I've already started pulling records. Gerald Wong, your mother's original attorney, is still practicing. I spoke with his office yesterday afternoon. He confirmed he prepared the April will and has the original on file. He also said your mother never contacted him about changes or updates after that date." My breath caught. So she never wanted to change it? "That's what it's looking like," Ramona said. "I'm also running background on Howard Pemberton. He specializes in real estate law, not estate planning. It's odd that your mother would switch to him for something like a will." "What does that mean?" "It could mean someone specifically sought him out because he'd be less likely to ask difficult questions." I pressed my temples to try and process everything. "I've also requested copies of the notarization records for both wills, and I'm scheduling interviews with the witnesses from the June document, Paul Gorski and Diane Mercer." "How long does all of this take?" I asked. "A few weeks minimum before we file the contest." A few weeks. In a few weeks, Corinne could have the house listed. I didn't have that much time. "Do whatever you need to do," I said. "I'll cover the costs." 4 days later, Ramona called with an update. "I spoke with Joyce Finch," she said, "one of the witnesses from the April will. She remembers the day clearly, said your mother invited her and Lorraine over for tea, asked them to witness the signing. She specifically mentioned wanting you to have the house because you were starting over and needed stability." My eyes burned, but I didn't let myself cry. "What about the June witnesses?" I asked. "That's where things get murky," Ramona said. "Paul Gorski works as a paralegal downtown. He claims he witnessed a will signing in June, but when I pressed him for details, he couldn't describe your mother, said it was just another notarization." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "Exactly," Ramona said. "And Diane Mercer is even more suspicious. She's a notary public who works out of a shipping store on the east side. Her notary logs show she was out of town that entire week in June, family wedding in Atlanta." The air left my lungs. "So she couldn't have notarized it," I said. "Not unless the date on the document is wrong. Either way, it's a problem, a big one." "What do we do now?" "Now we get aggressive," Ramona said. I'm filing the will contest tomorrow morning. We'll request handwriting analysis, forensic examination, depositions from everyone involved, and I'm filing an injunction to prevent your sister from selling or transferring the property until this is resolved." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close to hope. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet," Ramona replied. "This is about to get very ugly." The injunction was served to Corinne on a Tuesday afternoon, about a week and a half later. I wasn't there when it happened, but Tessa called me immediately after. "She knows," Tessa said. "I just drove past the house and saw her standing on the porch with papers in her hand, and she looked furious." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Corinne. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "What the hell is this?" Corinne's voice was sharp, cutting. "You're suing me?" "I'm contesting the will," I said. "There's a difference." "Are you insane? Mom left me the house. You're really going to drag this through court because you're jealous?" "I'm not jealous," I said. "I found the real will, Corinne, the one from April, the one where Mom left the house to me." Silence. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do, and so does my attorney. We have the original from Gerald Huang's office. We have witnesses who remember Mom signing it, and we have some very interesting questions about the will you presented, like how one of the witnesses was out of state when it was supposedly notarized." Her breathing changed, got faster. "You're making a mistake," Corinne said, her voice dropping lower. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe, but at least I'll know I fought for what was mine." She hung up. The next few weeks moved like a slow-motion avalanche. Ramona filed motion after motion. Corinne hired her own attorney, some expensive guy named Preston Vance. They fought the injunction, tried to get the contest dismissed. But the evidence kept stacking up. The handwriting analysis came back first. According to the forensic examiner, the signature on the June will didn't match Mom's natural writing patterns. The pressure was inconsistent, the letter formations slightly off. Then came the notary investigation. Diane Mercer's story fell apart under questioning. She eventually admitted she'd been asked to backdate a notarization as a favor, though she claimed she didn't know what the document was for. Paul Gorski cracked easier. During his deposition, Ramona hit him with the evidence. The timeline discrepancies, the suspicious payment that had shown up in his bank account in mid-June. $750, deposited the same day the will was supposedly signed. He admitted he'd been paid to sign as a witness to a document he'd never actually seen being executed. And when Ramona asked who'd paid him, he said the name I'd been waiting to hear: Corinne. The hearing was scheduled for late February, almost 8 weeks after I'd found the envelope in Mom's drawer. I wore the same black dress I'd worn to her funeral, which felt grimly appropriate. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with dark wood paneling and rows of empty benches. Corinne sat at the defendant's table with Preston Vance, her face carefully blank. She didn't look at me when I walked in. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Eleanor Ripley, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She reviewed the case file for what felt like forever before she finally spoke. Judge Ripley said, "I've examined the evidence presented by both parties. Ms. Delgado, you've built a compelling case that the June 2023 will was executed under fraudulent circumstances. The notary's admission, the witness testimony, and the forensic analysis all point to the same conclusion." She turned to Corinne. "Ms. Halford, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Corinne stood, smoothing her skirt. "Your Honor, I loved my mother. Everything I did because I believed it was what she would have wanted." Judge Ripley's expression didn't change. "That's not what I asked," she said. "I asked if you had anything to say about the specific allegations of fraud and forgery." Corinne's attorney stood quickly, but Judge Ripley held up a hand. I've been on the bench for 22 years. I know what fraud looks like. Your client paid a witness to sign a fabricated document, used a notary who wasn't present for the execution, and presented that document as her deceased mother's final wishes. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime. The room went utterly quiet. I'm invalidating the June 2023 will. The April 2023 will is hereby reinstated as the valid last will and testament. The property at Maple Ridge Avenue is to be transferred to the petitioner immediately. She looked at Corinne, her gaze hard. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges, Ms. Halford. Corinne's face went ashen. Judge Ripley brought down her gavel, and the sound echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap. I didn't wait around to see Corinne's reaction. Ramona and I walked out together, down the courthouse steps and into the cold February afternoon. You did it, Ramona said. The house is yours. I nodded, but the victory felt strange, hollow in some ways, solid in others. My phone buzzed, a text from Tessa. Tessa wrote, I'm assuming by your silence that you won. Tell me everything. Also, I'm bringing wine. I smiled and started walking toward the parking garage. Behind me, I heard footsteps, fast ones. I turned and found Corinne standing there, her perfect composure finally cracked. Her eyes were red, her hands balled into fists at her sides. You're really going to take everything from me? She said, her voice shaking. I'm taking what was mine, I said, what Mom wanted me to have. She didn't want you to have it. Corinne spat. She pitied you. That's why she left you the house, because you're pathetic and you couldn't make it on your own. The words should have hurt. A year ago, they would have. But standing there, with the judgment in my hand and the truth finally out, they just felt desperate. Believe whatever you need to believe, I said, but Mom knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I needed a fresh start, and she gave me one. You had everything already, Corinne. You just couldn't stand that she gave me something you wanted. Her face twisted. I'll never forgive you for this, she said. Good, I said, because I'll never forgive you for what you did to Mom. You didn't just forge her will. You disrespected her, betrayed her trust, and tried to erase her final wishes because you decided you knew better. I turned and started walking. Corinne called after me, You'll never be happy there. I stopped, looked back one last time. No, I said, I'll walk through that house every day and remember Mom, the way she laughed when she was gardening, the way she made everything feel safe, the way she believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. You can keep your guilt, Corinne. I'm keeping her memory. And then I left her standing there in the parking lot, alone with the consequences of her choices. I moved into the house on Maple Ridge Avenue the first week of March, right as the weather started to turn. The tulips Mom had planted were just beginning to push up through the soil, little green shoots that promised color in a few more weeks. Corinne had cleared out fast, hired movers, stripped the place of everything she'd brought in. The reading chair was back in its spot by the window. The yellow welcome mat was back on the porch. Tessa helped me unpack, and we spent the first evening sitting on the porch with takeout and cheap wine, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Your Mom would be proud. You know that, right? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Because the truth was, I did know. I could feel it in the house, in the way the light fell through the kitchen windows, in the smell of the garden soil warming in the afternoon sun. Mom had given me more than just a house. She'd given me a foundation. And Corinne had tried to take it. But she failed.
If you've made it this far in the story, thank you for sticking with me through this whole mess. I know it's heavy, but sometimes the truth is. If this resonated with you, or if you've ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. We're all just trying to figure this out together, right? The criminal investigation into Corinne took another few months. The district attorney's office charged her with forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. She pleaded no contest as part of a deal that kept her out of prison but put her on probation for 2 years and required her to pay restitution. The local news picked up the story. It ran for a few days, splashed across the evening broadcasts. Local woman forges mother's will, caught in elaborate fraud scheme. Corinne's face was everywhere, her perfect life unraveling in real time. Her husband, Briggs, filed for divorce 6 weeks after the sentencing. Apparently, fraud and public humiliation weren't part of his carefully curated image. I didn't feel sorry for her. It's been almost a year now since I found that envelope. New Year's came and went again, and this time I celebrated it in my house, Mom's house, my house, with Tessa and Ivy and a few other friends. We made a toast at midnight, standing in the kitchen where Mom used to bake her lemon cakes, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd fought for what mattered and won. The garden is thriving. I planted new roses last spring, and they're already climbing the trellis Mom installed years ago. I've been teaching myself to cook using her recipe cards. I haven't spoken to Corinne since that day in the parking lot. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved out of state, started over somewhere in Colorado, somewhere far from the wreckage she'd created here. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. Because this house, this life, this fresh start, it's mine. It was always supposed to be mine. Mom knew what she was doing when she sat down with Gerald Wong that April morning and put my name on that will. She knew I needed this, needed the stability, the foundation, the tangible proof that I was worth investing in. And she was right. Every morning when I wake up in the room that used to be hers, with sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen, I remember that. Some stories don't end happily. Some families can't be salvaged. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. But some stories, the ones where you fight for yourself, where you refuse to let someone else rewrite your truth, those stories end exactly the way they should, with you standing in your house, on your porch, in your life, surrounded by everything you fought for. And that's exactly where I am now. Home.